Hi, my name's Josh. I run Cigarette Rooms, and thank you all for coming down today for Cooler Carol. This is the third in the House of Walker season. Next week we'll have a House of Whipcord with Pete Walker down here and Jonathan Rigby in Q&A discussion. And then following that we'll have Frightmare with Jonathan Rigby introducing, and that'll be on 35mm. This is also on 35mm, which is pretty exciting. It's meant to be a really clean, nice print. The colours are supposed to be good. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it and all its 35 sleaziness. Otherwise, yeah, so this is Matthew Sweet is going to introduce. He's sitting there. Matthew.
Yes, hello.
Hi, would you like to come up and
I will,
introduce them?
yeah. Thank you.
A nice clean print, you said, yeah, unlike the film itself, which is nothing of the sort. A Pete Walker season at the Barbican. Now, I mean, there are two explanations for this, aren't there? Either the Barbican standards are slipping and that we're approaching the edge of some kind of abyss of cultural values, or we were right all along, and that there's some pretty fundamental realignment going on about what we really do value in our cultural past. And I'm delighted, really, to see that these works are being rescued from, if not obscurity, then rescued from being distributed rather further than they might have been in the past. Or maybe even were at the time, because I know that even when Pete Walker films got nominated for technical BAFTAs, which they did occasionally, they made very sure not to invite Pete to the ceremony, because they didn't quite like the idea of him being there. These films were rather marginal. They were sort of under the counter. And Cooler Carol is one that, in a way, is slightly separate from the horror films that are screening in this season. It's from his early period, where he's working in what we must call, I suppose, the sexploitation genre. Something that we associate with the 70s, and indeed with the leading man of this film, Robin Askwith. But probably the most objectified star in the whole of British cinema. In fact, Robin Askwith's bottom, I suppose, is one of the kind of iconic 70s objects. If you were, you know, if the Earth was about to be destroyed and we were going to kind of send out some kind of arc in which things that would show the aliens how we truly were, then Robin Askwith's bottom would have to be in there somewhere. And here you will see it really being exposed for the first time. The other films in this season are horror films. In a way, Cooler Carol is a sort of horror film too. Partly, I think, because at the moment we're looking back at the 70s with a shudder. The 70s are on trial at the moment, and Cooler Carol might be an exhibit in that legal process. We should probably think about that as we watch it. Cinema itself, British cinema, was in a pretty tough, operating in a pretty tough world at this point. It was experiencing something of a lull, really. I mean, Pete Walker says that when he went along once to see the film of his that he made just before this called School for Sex, being screened in a cinema in Mitcham, and he went through the door and he saw that there was about 20 people in this huge cinema, and that some of them were tearing the seats up. And he said to the manager, "Look, I'm sorry about this. I didn't realise business was this bad." And the manager said, "No, this is a good night. I'm fine. I'm perfectly happy with this." So things were in a pretty dire state at this point. But I think one of the values of this film is that it does show. It shows us as we were to some extent. It shows London, unprettified, unalloyed. And you know, when you watch a film that's been made in a studio, or even TV that's been made in one of the posher studios, you're used to going into spaces that are bigger than real life. Like Tara King's flat in The Avengers, far bigger than any real room has any right to be. But here we're in real spaces. And this is the kind of thing that a film of this sort cannot hide from you. You are in these horrible conversions. There is cheap pine everywhere. There are sweat stains on people's nylon shirts. There is horrible anaglypta wallpaper. This is a very kind of unaestheticized world. And it's one that we can now look back on, and bring all sorts of interests to it. It was based, this film, on a story in the News of the World that Pete Walker's writer, I think, read. The story of two people, a young couple who'd come up from the country and who got into the seedy world of porn, which is where this story is in essence set. It was transformed into a script, although the ending is rather different, because obviously in real life they did talk to people about it, which was how the story ended up in the News of the World, and the hero, or the real life equivalent of the hero, ended up in a borstal for having lived on the immoral earnings of his girlfriend. So weirdly, this is a film with a happy ending, even though happiness really seems to have no place in this world. This is a world of sort of indifference and emotional glaciation, really. It's rather a chilly sort of film. Robin Askwith is the star. It says in a way a kind of the great leading man of the 70s, though kind of the gatekeepers have tried to forget him rather. He was the Evening Standard's best newcomer of 1971 or 2, I think. A figure who people did turn up to see. And I think this is one of the things we have to remember about films like this. We've forgotten them because we're a bit ashamed of them and embarrassed by them. But people really went to see films like this. They weren't as marginal as cultural memory would have you believe. The heroine of the film is played by Janet Lynn, an actor who didn't do too much after this and retired from the business shortly after, I think. And her performance is fascinating too. I mean, not the most artful performance you've ever seen, but her odd kind of dissociation from everything that goes on around her seems to be at the heart of what the film is. She's not, in the words of the American title of this film, the dirtiest girl I ever met. She's something very different from that. What you'll hear her saying in this film is, I don't mind. And I think, if we're looking back at the history of the permissive society and that moment in British culture, I don't mind might actually be rather more important than other, perhaps less convincing exclamations that we might be used to associating it with. I want to give you just two tiny little things about some of the other actors who you'll meet. The great Derek Aylward, one of Pete Walker's muses in this period. He plays a seedy character called Tommy Sanders in this. Pete Walker only booked him because he mistook him for Tony Britton, who you may remember as the star of Robin's Nest. And he thought he was getting someone else entirely. But Derek Aylward loved being in this sort of film. In fact, he loved it so much he ended up in real hardcore porn, which when you look at him, you may be a little surprised to know that. In the 50s. He was a juvenile lead for Binky Beaumont, the famous theatrical producer, who sacked him because he rather disapproved of Aylward's attitudes and activities. He used to keep a plaster cast of his own penis in his dressing room, and at home he had it converted into a table lamp. The cast that is. And he fell out with Binky Beaumont and had to leave the West End and go and work in television, where the first play he appeared in was a play called Blow Your Own Horn, in which he played the part of Dick. So there's a sort of consistency to his career. You'll also meet Jess Conrad, a teen sensation, former teen sensation, Jess Conrad, here entering a slightly sleazy period. Rather, still with us, Jess Conrad, and a man whose vanity caused a couple of problems on the set of Kulik Carol. Pete Walker had to abandon a scene entirely when he discovered that Jess Conrad, you'll see the scene when we come to it, set in a car, and Jess Conrad, because he had no dialogue, kept looking into the camera to check his hair in the reflection in the lens. So I'm going to stop talking in a minute because I don't know whether I've totally put you off this now, because we are going to enter quite a dark zone here, and it's called 1970s Britain. So if you can see this as a sort of, we're all going to be processed here. We're all going to go through a kind of therapy for cultural amnesia, where we will be reacquainted with the awfulness of the 70s, the slightly cherishable awfulness of the 70s, in a way that perhaps we have forgotten. And I want you to listen out for a line that Janet Lynn says as she comes out of Paddington Station, which kind of seals the moment, really. So do enjoy Kulik Carol, experience Kulik Carol. We may all be different people by the time that the lights go up again. Thank you very much.